So, Yola, first of all, it's always exciting to get another album out, but it has to be kind of strange for you because you get that first record out and you waited a long time to get that out, right? You were like in your mid-30s and
Yes.
first album comes out. Did you have any idea of the kind of impact it was going to have, the kind of success you were going to have with that?
No. Like, to be fair, like, I was coming over to America to write, and it was the longest commute I think anyone I knew was doing at the time. I lived in Bristol in southwest England, and I was hopping on the plane that goes from just between Bristol and London, Heathrow no less, to direct to Nashville, and then writing and doing work here. And so it was like I was just getting to know the city. I hadn't met Dan until our first writing session where we wrote Shady Grove. And so it wasn't like I knew anything as to what was going on. I was just figuring out, how is this place different to where I live in England, which it turns out a lot. And so, yeah, like that's what that first record felt like to me. It was like I was meeting Nashville through the medium that it's so well known for, music.
So you have this incredible success with the record,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, finally, everything is taking off. And then you run into this wall called pandemic. That has got to be really frustrating.
It was actually awesome. I know,
That's
right?
not the answer I was expecting.
You were expecting that. So it was the best. And I tell you why it was the best. Because I had to shoot the movie with Baz Luhrmann in Australia in the April of that year. I had to then come back and squeeze in like a week of writing or something like that. And then I had all of these dates, just everything was happening. So it wasn't like it was going to be time to do everything, but it was definitely going to be tight. And so when all of a sudden and also like I'd got the part, I'd figured out what I was doing, but I hadn't had loads of time to practice soloing because obviously I'm a rhythm player. I've never soloed in my life. And so, like, all of a sudden, I had all of this time to practice soloing, and I had all of this time to kind of almost go through my back catalogue of songs that I really felt had something, and I just wanted to kind of give them a chance, to shine. Like, I knew there was something in them. And so I was able to go through my back catalogue, and find Diamond Studded Shoes that I co-wrote with Erin Lee Tasjian. And I took that into the room and I was like, I feel like this is almost there. Can you two help me get it over the line? So Dan Auerbach and Natalie Hemby helped me get it over the line. Same with the song that I started writing um, just after the day of my mother's funeral in 2013. Called Break the Bow on the record. That was another one that I knew had something, and I played like a live version that we'd done way back, and Dan was like, oh yeah, this has got something. And so I played it on the guitar and I was like, okay, so this is the structure. And so we were able to kind of like take things that I knew had fire and just bring them up to current and just lock them in. And I had time also to during lockdown just to sit until 5 o'clock in the morning with a guitar and a glass of wine whilst the sun was coming up and figure things out, and so I could just like I had all of this time to kind of really think about what I wanted to do without the stress of being, well, up until this first record, I was then, building my team. I was self-managed, then going into being managed by Never Know. And then I was looking for all of my team and everything for the first record. It was so hectic. And then the handing over of all that work was just massive. So I didn't have that luxuriant time that people talk about for the first record. For me, the pandemic was that. So I wasn't able to be in the room for so much of the time. But the time that I had on my own, I was able to come up with things that I then took into the room. And then when we were able to get into the room, we were able to come up with other ideas whilst we were all in the room together. But I was able to bring a lot to the table. And that's not the first record, every song was written in the room. So kind of by that measure, the second record is probably less collaborative than the first. It's definitely, there's more me all over it because of the nature of the pandemic. And that was really satisfying.
I have obviously a bunch more questions here. So the second album, it's usually seen as a big follow up to the first album, but that's not exactly the path because some of these songs are like they were the children in the attic that you finally brought down and said, okay, now we're going to educate you and dress you up and put you out there. So it's a little bit different for a sophomore record.
Yes, it really is. And I think especially with some of them, they were so personal, especially with the kind of, it's a bit of a party song, party funeral song for my late mother. I didn't know if I wanted to bring that song into the room before I knew people, which is understandable because it's going to be emotional singing that song on the record. And like, you just want to know what environment you're in before you go, hey, and now here's this precious little jewel, please don't make me cry about it. I don't know if I can take it. And so there are some situations in which I was like, I don't know if this is the time yet to broach this. And also maybe needing a bit more distance from her death to be able to sing about it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, it's personal because sometimes things need time.
Well, I also think it's interesting that maybe part of the process is also just growing up and becoming more assured of yourself, and certainly having success with the first album helps that when you're touring and meeting people like Brandy Carlisle or Natalie Hemby or Dolly Parton, all the people that you've worked with. Well, that is going to change your attitude about what you're capable of.
Yeah, it really is. And these songs existed, and some of them, like Diamond Studded Shoes, were almost at completion, and I knew that they had it, and but it's just being sure of your ideas and that they're going to fly in that way. And so, like, even if you have confidence in them, you're like, is everyone else going to agree with me? Like, there's something very specific about being a dark-skinned Black woman where, like, you are in a space and you're like, oh, I think I'm, this person. And then people go, oh, I see this, because we don't have much representation of your type of person. And so then it becomes, am I able to be this broad, or am I able to do this? And so that guided the bringing out of these songs in this next record. I was like, I think I can. I think it's okay. And even if it isn't, I'm just going to do it anyway, because honestly, I don't think I can hold it in anymore.
Well, the name of the album is Stand for Myself. And I think that's a message for you, but I think it's also a message for other people as well.
Yes. 100%. Very astutely noted. It's true. It's not just me speaking to myself, although it is. It's me telling a story of my journey from kind of not, and really trying to just fit in and not stick out like a sore thumb, but because I'm the token, which I always was. And what it's like to go from that point. In the first song, Barely Alive, which is co-written by Joy Oladokun, who is also experienced being a token. So we were talking about that and like talking to Dan about it, and he's like, dude, all of this is heavy. I'm like, yeah, let's get this in the song. And so it was a joy writing with her. And then right the way through, kind of like talking about allyship, where Brandy makes an appearance on that, spoiler alert, vocally, and it's co-written by Rubia Manfu. And and we go through all these situations where, from a romantic standpoint, from any standpoint, where it, from a social standpoint of friendship or whatever, where I feel like I've had to stand for my right to for nuance, for being seen in a way without it being some negative trope. And so, yeah, like that's really the journey of the record. And it's a pleading for anybody who has been an other to do the same.
You know, tomorrow is the 50th anniversary of Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." So, you know, we asked a lot of people around the area, what did that album mean to you? And a lot of people talked about he was able to say things that were easier for people to accept because it came through music, that it made that message a little easier for people to hear. It sounds to me like some of that is happening here with this record, that there are important things to say that sometimes people don't want to hear, but it's a little bit easier to get it to them if it comes through music.
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. Also, I think, honestly, it's easier to say it through music. It's easier to purge in a poetic way, because the way that I write is by the arrival of songs, not by the actual muscling it out with my prefrontal cortex. I spend a lot of my time getting into a pre-dream state. So all the ideas coalesce, you know? And so because of that way of writing, like I find that I get a lovely, elegant mix of ideas and of things that I've been marinating on for a long time. And so that's the best way for me to get something that I'm feeling out in a way that feels like really boiled down to the essence of what it is, because of the caliculi. If I want to get into neurology, which I do all the time, it's the way that our brain collects information. I like to tap into that for songwriting and for getting my point across, and that I find that really elegant. And so, yeah, that's why this record is the way that it is, because of the way it was written. I didn't wait. I didn't try and muscle it out. I waited for the ideas to arrive, and I put myself in the state of mind for the ideas to arrive. And all they did was tell you who I am and what's going on in my head a lot of the time.
That explains those 5 a.m. glasses of wine and waiting for the sun to rise and the ideas to rise.
Yes.
So nuance, you mentioned the word nuance. And nuance is something that, you know, some people are born with it, most of us aren't. You know, nuance is, trying to get to a place of saying things without saying everything or finding the right way to say it. So tell me why nuance. And I read a lot about this record, and you talked about that you really wanted nuance in this.
Yeah, because I think, honestly, people have said to me in the past, oh, you can't write things that are personal because, things need to be general. They need to apply to everybody. I'm like, they also don't. They also need to tell a specific story, because you'll be surprised how unoriginal one person is. And how that can really apply to way more people than you think it can apply to. And to be able to feel like your horoscope style, zeroing in on someone's life experience, has far more value than some general thing that could technically apply to anyone. And if anyone's ever read a horoscope and they're like, that could be anybody, then they don't take it seriously. And so, like, the idea is to try and, like, actually speak on something that is truly the core of your existence, but that feels universal, or it feels like it applies to a decent number of people. I just keep on trying to find these salient truths in my life. And to find those truths, you can't be heavy-handed with it. There's always nuance that's the thing that makes it the most true. So, like you in Barely Alive, for example, we've got like an opening line of I've been there and I know how it is. I've been living it alone for all these years, isolated, we holding our fears. And like the idea was just the idea of being isolated, but isolated as a woman of color in a very white space. But I was like, oh, wait a minute, it's the pandemic, so everyone's going to feel this in some way. And then we're talking about like the idea of even in Be My Friend, there's a line that goes, even if we're always smiling like we mean no harm or shade. And I'm like, how many times has a person of color been walking behind some old white lady and been like, oh God, are they really aware that I'm walking behind them right now? Should I slow down? Like, hi, I'm really going to paint it on for you, you know? Just like, I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat. Like, you know, these things happen with us all the time. And so, like, being able to write about my life experience, that specifically, is very freeing. And it's not like this happens this way. There's nuance in the nature of how you experience that, because it's a very specific kind of person that you're walking behind. It's a very specific like experience and feeling that you're having. And so then nuance is the only thing that makes sense of it.
You know, I read somewhere where you said that this album was going to be sort of a door into your mind, so that if somebody comes up to you and says, Yola, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind? It's like, listen to my record.
Yeah, like 100%. What do you think about this? It's on the record. What about this? It's on the record. There's even but the vinyl, there's even lyrics in there. Like, I'm like, I've done everything I can to help you.
You know, I want to go back to the whole Baz Luhrmann thing, because I'm really fascinated by. Have you done any acting? I mean, I've seen your videos, and you certainly know how to emote in the videos. But have you done acting?
No, never in my life. And I was told by Baz that I should seriously consider it. So,
well, you know, I have to say that just even watching the videos, there's a lot that comes through. You know, you have a really charismatic nature that people are drawn in. They want to know you, I think, is the way I felt whenever I listened to your music. But also when I saw you, it was like, I want to know her. I wish I could sit down and have a glass of wine with her at 5 a.m. I mean, that's the way I felt. You were supposed to play Sister Rosetta Tharpe. What an incredible role.
Yes, and we have done the filming, which is exciting. And
so tell me about Sister Rosetta. Were you much aware of her before you took this role?
Yeah, like massively. And so she was a real hero. I think I still learned things whilst I was on set because of the depth of research that Baz had done, and on talking to Baz on many occasions, be it over when we're all having dinner, or if we're like when we're in a meeting or on set, you know, like there's so much information that he's managed to get from like source, from family members of, you know, Elvis's family members, of like researching BB King and Little Richard, and so I was already a fan and already very much in the know, and then like that just knowledge just deepened.
No, she was amazing. She was also a great guitar player.
She was one of the greatest guitar players of all time, which is intimidating because I've never soloed in my life. So I had to, luckily the pandemic bought me some time to actually practice soloing. So every time you see me land a solo, I did that, and I slaved over the guitar for hours and hours and hours and hours so I could do that for you all. So yeah, don't take that for granted. It was really hard, and I had to do it for 15 hours until my fingers were very, very, very tender. And so that's 15 hours a day, because those shoot days are long. But yeah, she invented rock and roll. Let's be real about it. She invented it. There was a night in Beale Street, which was her night. Everyone that we now know as the proponents of rock and roll went to her night like a pilgrimage. And because they were enamored with her style of guitar playing and her sound, her tone, because no one had ever played with a distorted guitar sound before. So they were like, what is this? So they go to see it. You'd have B.B. King and Elvis go to see it. You'd have Little Richard, who she discovered and gave him his first showcase, go to see it. You had like Ike Turner go to see it. You know, like all these people that were in this environment who then went on to affect music in the broadest ways possible. Like without Little Richard being discovered by her, I don't think you even get Prince. And so you think of the number of things that you don't get if she doesn't have that night. None of this happens. So much doesn't happen. And so, yeah, like that was something that I was very aware of, the importance of how to represent her sense of holding court, her regalness, even without speech, just in that sense of this is all mine. All I survey is mine.
Well, I think if anybody even just Googles and looks at a video of her, you get the sense of that she was in command. She knew what she was doing.
Yeah, she really knew what she was doing. But also at the same time, I don't think she could have even predicted the extent to which of what she was doing, because then the effect has rolled on for the entirety of contemporary music history. And everyone else has claimed to be the inventors, the creators, the first people to do rock and roll or to create said sound, or to influence said people. But so much of it goes back to her. It's actually extremely astounding.
Well, the new album, Stand For Myself, is coming out in July. Is there any particular song that's sort of the centerpiece to this album for you?
Yeah, Stand For Myself.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, right? Because it's telling you exactly what to do for yourself, and in that sense of stand for your right, for nuance, for humanity, and for the right to connect and to not be just minimized into like a trope or something less elegant than the full, spectrum of who you are. And so it's the end point and in a way the beginning, because the record starts with Barely Alive and that idea of the minimizing token, the person that's terrified and living in fear. And the last song is very much, you've been there and you've come out the other side, and you're speaking to someone who hasn't done that process yet, going, it's worth it. Like, make some changes. Think about the way you think about yourself. Think about the paradigm that you're living under, and make some changes in that regard. And so everything in the record is leading up to that point. And in a way, it's like a spiral within a spiral, because at that point of the end of the record is really the beginning of the change.
Well, if the first record was about surviving, the second record is about thriving.
Yes.
And I can't even imagine what record 3 is going to be about, but I can't wait.
That's already thoughts are occurring in my mind already, but everything is connected.
Well, I can tell you a couple times in this interview you have said, well, I never have, or I never did, but I have a feeling by the time you get to be an old lady, there's not going to be too many nevers left. You're going to get rid of all of those.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that. I think this is the funny thing. People go, oh, so your first record came out in your mid-30s, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I was just so terrified for the first 30 years of my life. And I didn't really know support, care. And so I didn't really have it within myself to manufacture all of that on my own. And so if I keep on being in environments that show me support and care, I will keep creating.
I'm looking forward to it. And Yola, I know that you have been busy promoting this record, so I really appreciate the time that you took with WYEP today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you again.